I don't think many people realise quite how close the war in Ukraine is to spreading into World War III. China is in fact backing Russia, and Russia has now reportedly asked it for help, military equipment, plus help to escape the sanctions. And the US simply can't allow that, can't allow China to help Russia win. And last night, US President Joe Biden's national security advisor and China's very top foreign affairs boss met in Rome over 7 hours to, and we must hope, sort this out. Joining me is the country's top foreign affairs commentator, Greg Sheridan of the Australian newspaper. Greg, this meeting, let's be honest, was actually scheduled weeks ago before the war, but how critical was it that it occurred now?
So, Andrew, I think this is an intensely important meeting. It's hard to see what it yields. I think China still thinks that it's more or less in the box seat. It's very happy to have America coming to it as a supplicant saying, please help us with Russia. It's very happy to have Russia coming to it as a supplicant saying, please help. I guess the question for China is how much economic interaction it can have with Russia without incurring US sanctions. And that's going to be true for a number of other countries in the world too, including our friends India and other countries like Iran and Turkey. I don't think the Chinese are ever going to sacrifice anything for Russia, but nor are they ever going to do anything to hurt Russia or pull it back. And of course, with the invasion going so badly for Russia, they won't get associated with it in the public mind too much for the moment. But I don't know what the Sullivan talks, well, none of us knows what they've achieved as yet.
No, in fact, there's been almost no word about what was said at this meeting, which is very interesting. Certainly nothing for them to boast about, saying, you know, we made a breakthrough and all that kind of stuff. So that's rather concerning. But I'm wondering what game China's really playing, or what it hoped to play, in fact. Maybe I should put it like that. Before, during the Beijing, just at the day one of the Beijing Olympics, they signed a deal with Russia. And they also signed a lot of trade deals too. So the deal said, we're going to back Russia. This is an unbreakable bond, and its claims to Ukraine quite right. And it signed a lot of trade deals, presumably to help it survive any blowback. But I wonder, Greg, whether dictator Xi Jinping has actually made a huge political mistake backing Russia and making the West wake up, not just to the Russian threat, but to the Chinese threat, and now unite, like I'd never predicted, particularly in Europe, to resist it.
Yeah, well, that's a very powerful analysis, Andrew, and you may well be right. I think it's very provisional at this stage. The Chinese and the Russians traditionally hate each other. I mean, the Russians were going to undertake a nuclear strike against the Chinese in the 1970s. There's no love lost in this de facto alliance. I think we don't know what goes on at the top of the Chinese leadership. The Western intelligence agencies will all tell you we haven't got a blind clue about what gets discussed in Zhongnanhai compound. I think the Chinese, it's probably fair to infer that the Chinese thought the Russians would be more competent and more effective and secure a quicker victory. On the other hand, the Chinese haven't really committed anything to the Russians, and they're always going to be pretty transactional about this. The Russians have become now very dependent on the Chinese. Chinese be happy to have the Russians as a junior partner, happy to be in this box seat where the Americans are asking them for help, and the Chinese haven't done anything to indicate displeasure with the Russians. They abstained from the resolution at the United Nations. I guess the question is how long Putin will keep this going for. My sense is that Stalinist regimes can survive quite a lot of pain, quite a lot of economic pain in their people for a long time. So my guess is the Chinese are unhappy that the Russians have made such a mess of this, but they'd still, the Chinese have got 2 or 3 critical friends in the world, Russia, Iran and North Korea. And they're not going to sacrifice any of those to Western interests. And all 3 of those states are dependent on China and capable of causing enormous trouble to the United States. So China is always interested in a friend who can cause enormous trouble to the United States. China will be studying all these lessons very closely for its own potential moves on Taiwan. China is so much more powerful than Russia. On the other hand, it wouldn't want to face a backlash of global opinion like Russia is facing right now. So this is a very tense. I think you're right to say there's a danger of World War III here, because I think if Putin is under enough pressure, he could well try to escalate. I think that's not likely to happen, but there's a 20% chance that it might happen, and that's pretty disturbing. So we're really in a terrible suck it and see moment right now, where almost anything is possible. I wrote today in the paper that I think Biden has been pretty irresolute, actually. He's getting terrific marks for the sanctions, but I think the failure to give Ukraine these Polish jets is a real sign of weakness. He's allowing Putin to deter him, whereas he's not deterring Putin. So I think this is an AFL game that's, kind of at the end of the first quarter.
Look, I think you're absolutely correct, and it's interesting. I think, there's Putin going around saying, you do anything and I threaten nuclear war. He's not scared, or at least says he's not, and the West is scared. So that gives him carte blanche, and he may, I agree, may create an incident to drag China to his rescue. That is the real worry here. But isn't it ironic, Greg? I want to pick up on a couple of things he said. The whole ambition here of Putin was to make a grand Russia again. Russia big, capturing Ukraine. That's really Russian territory, he said. It's not, but that's what he said. And who knows what it'll invade after that. It's really taken, of course, Chechnya. The thing is, he could end this war as a vassal state of China, the one country that's going to keep him going with all the banking sanctions. He depends now more on Chinese banks, or is trying to. His oil and gas will go to China. He could just turn into a little vassal state of China. It could be a humiliation for Russia.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Andrew. And there's no doubt that China is the senior partner. So Russia's economy is only about the size of Australia's, which makes you think, how can he have all this military power and we've got no military power at all with the same sized economy? And clearly, Putin has made a series of miscalculations. Now, no one is morally responsible for this except Putin. But I think Joe Biden contributed mightily to Putin's miscalculations. So Biden's weakness made Putin underestimate the strength of the Western sanctions response. Clearly, Putin underestimated the Ukrainian military. This happens to one-man dictatorships. They never get advice that is honest, that disagrees with them. So his generals were all telling him how great his army was and how hopeless the Ukrainians were. But Putin has taught the Ukrainians how to fight. Since he gobbled up Crimea and a large part of the Donbass region, the Ukrainians have been in a fight which has cost 11 or 12,000 lives ever since, and they've learnt how to die and how to kill. And he underestimated their bravery, swallowed all that mystical rubbish about Greater Russia. But on the other hand, Stalinist dictators are very sanguine about making their people suffer. And he is going to be very tough. I remember, Andrew, after the Tiananmen massacre in 1989 in Beijing, a lot of analysts whom I respected enormously said, well, this is the end of the Chinese Communist Party. They've got no credibility with the people now. They're brute dictators. They rely on force in a way they haven't for decades. They're finished. And look at them today, the most powerful they've ever been. I do think Putin has damaged himself enormously, damaged his economy, but I'm not sure he's out of the game yet.
Mate, when Mao Zedong can starve to death 40 million plus of his own people and still have his picture on the side of the Forbidden Wall and be a national saint, that tells you a lot, and a lot that's bad. Greg Sheridan, thank you so much for your time.